Hello, cavemen. Miss Apezteguia here today to talk about your brain, specifically the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. The amygdala, the small blue part in this picture, processes emotions and triggers quick, reactive responses and matures in your early teens. The prefrontal cortex, the large orange part at the front of the brain in this picture, is the last part of the brain to mature and is responsible for reasoning, planning, identifying emotions, and impulse control. You've probably heard it before, but it's true. Teen brains work differently from adult brains. Adults mostly use the part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex, which helps them plan, think ahead, and make better decisions based on long-term consequences. Teens, on the other hand, often rely more on the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that handles emotions. So while adults are mostly thinking logically, teens are often reacting emotionally. In adults, all parts of the brain are well connected and usually work together smoothly. But in teens, the connections between the emotional and logical part are still growing and not always at the same speed. That's why when something emotional happens, it can be hard to explain later what you were thinking, because you weren't thinking as much as you were feeling. This is sometimes called flipping your lid. People like to give a hand model of the brain and they flip their fingers up when the lid is flipped. And it's here your amygdala taking over and your logical brain just kind of checked out for a minute. And with all this being said, there are times that adults still flip their lid as well. Jody Carrington reminds us that a little bump in the road doesn't bother us when we're in a good place. But it's a lot more difficult when we're feeling stressed, overwhelmed, grieving, or in conflict. Remember, she says, the emotional regulation takes practice, and the dysregulation is not to be avoided. In fact, chaos is necessary to learn the calm. So what does this actually mean for you? First, your brain is powerful and flexible. The teen brain is amazing at learning and adapting. This means you have a huge advantage when it comes to picking up new skills and bouncing back from mistakes. Things like taking on tough classes, working out, or doing creative stuff like art and music or writing actually help your brain grow stronger and more connected. Second, social stuff feels like a big deal because it is to your brain. As your brain develops, it starts to care more about friendships and social situations. This is totally normal. The catch is, sometimes your brain can make social rewards, like impressing friends or fitting in, feel way more important than the actual consequences of your choices. The hard thing is that the consequences for some of these choices can cause stress. This brings us to the last thing I want to mention about your brain. Because your brain is still developing, you may respond to stress differently from adults. This can increase your chances of developing anxiety and depression. So it's important to recognize triggers and practice effective coping techniques to help you deal with your stress. Sounds like a lot, right? No need to worry. Even with these stresses and challenges during your teenage years, most teens go into healthy adults. During this time of changes in the brain, you're developing resilience and tools that will help you for the rest of your life. One of the great things about being a teenager is you're surrounded by many different adults, such as your teachers, your advocates, counselors, administrators, parents, and other family members. Usually, these are all the people who are helping you develop resilience and tools you need later in life. As adults, it feels like we're wired to give advice, make suggestions, and discuss consequences. I'm sure there are times that you feel like this is super helpful to you, like when you're getting ready to ask someone on a date for the very first time, or you're filling out your first application for college, a scholarship, or a job, or you're thinking about the future and it just seems overwhelming. And then there are times when I'm sure you get tired of the adults in your life giving advice or discussing consequences. You may even think, they're not perfect. Why do they keep harping at me? And you're not wrong. What you may not know is that hearing advice and consequences actually helps the brain make the connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So it's beneficial for developing resilience and coping skills. And sometimes there are times you just need to talk. So please, remind us if you want suggestions and advice, or if it's a time you just need us to listen. We can listen and remind you of times in the past when you thought something was going to be the end of the world, but it turned out to be just fine. We can also help you remember that you're resilient and capable. So why did I want to talk about the brain? Because I want you to understand a bit more how it works, how it's developing, and to let you know when you feel like all the adults in your world are nagging and bothering you about attendance and going to class, asking about your grades, and reminding you of consequences, they're trying to help your brain develop those connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. Connections that will help you improve your decision-making now and become an adult who can think through complex situations and make solid decisions. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You're learning, growing, and becoming more resilient every day. And you're not doing it alone. There are people around you who care, who want to listen, and who want to help you build those important brain connections. So next time it feels like the world is just too much, or an adult won't stop giving advice, just remember, your brain is leveling up, and you've got what it takes to handle it.